All right, so we are back after that music, which I guess a lot of people were interested in and liked quite a bit. There's some stuff about it in the chat. So it's my great pleasure to be able to introduce the other Greg. Which of us is, the first Greg? Well, neither of us. So this is Greg Lopez from the Stoic Fellowship and many other things as well. He is a member of the Modern Stoicism team. Co-founder and secretary of the Stoic Fellowship. If you don't know what the Stoic Fellowship is, maybe Greg will tell you a little bit about that. The founder and facilitator of the New York City Stoics. He also has been involved with Stoic camps in New York. He does a number of other things, and he is the co-author of a recent book, not quite recent enough to be on the book panel this time around, but a handbook for new Stoics with Massimo Pigliucci. Many of you probably know that one. It's full of great exercises and perspectives and things like that. So the idea behind this panel is Stoicism around the world, to get to know a little bit about what's happening in other places besides what we could call the Anglosphere, United States, Canada, Britain, Australia. There's a lot of that out there. But Stoicism is establishing. Stoicism has established roots all over the world, and the Stoic Fellowship, I think, is a good part of that. So we're joined, once everybody comes up, by a number of different people. I see Henry there already from Indonesia, Aldo from Brazil, Sascha is going to be joining us from Germany, Logan from Norway, and there's Kelly's also from Spain. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Greg, to run as you see fit and slip back into the background myself.
Yeah, thank you for the kind introduction, Greg. So, Greg pretty much gave an introduction, and we're going to be talking to several Stoics from around the world today. And we're just going to get started by going through each person on the panel and just kind of asking them to briefly introduce themselves, as well as the state of Stoicism in their neck of the woods, so to speak. So you'll have a few minutes, each of you, to describe things. And if you're interested, many of the panel members are members of the Stoic Fellowship, and many are running their own groups. If you're interested in finding whether there's a Stoic group near you, or if you want to found your own, we try to help people, and we're a nonprofit that does that, and it's all free of charge and stuff. We're completely volunteer run, so check out stoicfellowship.com for more info on that. But first, I'd like to go maybe first to Henry to describe a little bit about himself, as well as the state of Stoicism in Jakarta, Indonesia.
Right, thanks, Greg. Hello, everyone. Warm greetings from Indonesia. Very privileged. Very happy to be here. My name is Henry Manampiring. I'm the author of the book Philosophy Teras, or translated Philosophy from the Porch. I believe you can see the cover in my background. It is probably the first popular book on Stoicism written by an Indonesian in simple Indonesian language. So it was meant to be really for the layman. And it was published first in 2018, and I wasn't expecting much, actually, given the subject, and because philosophy is such an alien concept in this part of the world. But lo and behold, until now, the book is still on the top 10 shelf, and I think it's not so much about the book per se. I think it really attests to Stoicism universal appeal, even in this part of the world. So very happy to see it's gaining traction until now. It hasn't stopped. We have a Facebook group, Stoic Indonesia, and at the moment it already has more than 10,000 members. And I'm very glad now whenever I visit bookstore here in Indonesia, I can see more and more original Stoic texts. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, they have been translated into my language. So yeah, very, very encouraging trend here from Indonesia. Thanks, Greg. I think that's all for now.
Thank you, Henry. Next, I'll pass it over to Aldo to describe how Stoicism is going, and as well as his group and teachings in Brazil.
Hi. First of all, thanks for inviting me. I'm Aldo Dinucci, a professor in ancient philosophy at the Federal University of Sergipe and honorary research fellow of the University of Kent, and also a researcher of Stoicism who has always focused on Stoicism present and its diffusion in our contemporary world. I translated many ancient texts into Portuguese, such as Epictetus' Equidicium, Epictetus' Discourses, and Seneca's On the Brevity of Life, among others. In Brazil, I'm coordinating Viva Vox Stoa, this one. It is our symbol, which has been holding meetings to study Stoicism since August this year. Finally, we achieved this. Our first theme was Seneca's Medea. We overviewed the theme of passions in Stoicism, then read parts of Medea, interpreting it from many points of view. We also have a dissemination blog with translations, short essays, and links, which has reached almost 50,000 consults since its creation. Viva Vox is linked with the research group Epictetus and Philosophical Marginalia of the Brazilian Association of Postgraduation in Philosophy. Some 3 weeks ago, at the last Congress of this association, they invited me to present a workshop on Epictetus. This workshop was a success with more than 30 attendees. Besides Viva Vox, we have now in Brazil the Stoa Hermeneia, coordinated by David Lira, lecturer at the Federal University of Pernambuco. Stoa Hermeneia is an interdisciplinary research group dedicated to studying Stoicism and its developments in ancient culture. They plan many activities, such as workshops on ancient Greek and Latin, public readings of Seneca's texts, and study groups on Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Arius Didymus, among others. We are already planning activities among our groups. The first of them will be a conference of David Lira to Viva Vox on November 22. Also, we keep in contact with many other enthusiasts of Stoicism in Brazil, such as João Leite Ribeiro, writer, Donato Ferrara, teacher and blogger, Breno Lucano, blogger, Alexandre Pires, blogger and editor, Diogo da Luz and Fernando Fultura, researchers, Germano Martilelli, students, among many others. We have ties abroad also. First, with Dr. Kelly Rudolph, lecturer of the University of Canterbury, who has been actively supporting our activities since 2015, David Fideler, American writer, and Kai Whiting, English scholar and writer with whom we are in constant dialogue. We are thankful for all who have supported our activities over the years.
Thank you very much, Aldo. Next, I'll hand it over to Kelis to tell us what's going on in Madrid, Spain. You can't hear and you're having technical issues. Understood. I will move on to Sascha for now, and Sascha can tell us how things are going in Hanover, Germany.
Yes. Hi, Greg. So from B2, thank you for inviting me to speak here. I've joined Stoicism a couple of years ago as a humanist, as I was interested in the ethical foundations of modern humanism, and I've written 2 articles about it. One of which was about learning kindness. And since 2 years ago, I started a group for people interested in Stoicism. And we've met in person, but also online due to the pandemic. And last year and this year, we've held 2 Stoic conferences. Last year was about blows of fate and its meaning for human existence. And this year was more a practical approach. And Harry Wolff from Switzerland also held a workshop where he read and discussed several classic texts with the participants. And well, we're a small group in Hanover, so but we're trying to build up contact with other groups in Germany. Maybe I can also talk about them, because the community in Germany is not very big. It's a bit lagging behind to the English-speaking countries, and there's a small group in the Rhineland, and they are offering a podcast and a monthly podcast, and so whoever wants to listen to them can mail me, and I'll send the link. And there's also a group in Berlin and Munich, and they're also having regular tables. So, yeah, that's it, I guess. So.
Thank you very much, Sascha. And you're welcome to put your contact information in the chat if you feel comfortable with it. And that also, along with other panel participants, if you want to put contact information, feel free to do so. So I'll move on to Logan to tell us what's going on in Trondheim, Norway. But also, just like Sascha, I believe Logan is involved with the wider world as well, organizing something beyond his locale. So Logan, what's going on in your neck of the woods?
Yes, thanks for having me. I'm Logan Vallandingham. I'm the leader of the Trondheim Stoics, like you say. And I would say that it might be a symbol. I mean, I'm an American guy and I'm leading the Trondheim Stoics, and I founded it with another American guy. So maybe that gives you a hint at how things are going in Trondheim, at least. But we actually have over 100 members now, at least on the Facebook group for Trondheim. And we're also working a lot with the Stavanger Stoics and the Oslo Stoics. So we have kind of it's nationwide network that we're working with in Norway. If we think a little bit about how Stoicism is in Norway, I mean, I think that it's been a little bit increase, of course, in line with the national or international trends that we've seen with Stoicism growing in popularity. And then I also think that one thing that's interesting is a lot of the main principles in Stoicism are directly or indirectly kind of a part of the Norwegian culture as well, having to do with especially this kind of fellowship and thinking of the broader consequences of your own actions, which is something that I've noticed more and more now that I've become a little bit more aware of it through my own understanding of Stoicism. Yeah, I don't know if I have so much more to add about that. I think one thing I do want to mention also is Harald Kavli, which was also a big part of this event, is also in Norway and has been even more so able to kind of push Stoicism forward in Norway, and has been involved in publishing books and translating, which is just really amazing to see, getting the Stoic texts modern translation in Norwegian. So that's really encouraging to see. Yeah, I think I'll leave it there for now.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Logan. And finally, let's see if Kelly's, how is the audio going? I hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yep,
Amazing.
I can.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me in this panel. I'm Kelly Rodriguez. I'm the founder and facilitator of Stoa Madrid. I started the group as part of Stoic Fellowship late in 2018, when there was barely enough information in Spanish about Stoicism. The main idea of the group was to share Stoicism in this language, in Spanish, and to create a community of people who actively participated and studied Stoicism and practiced together. So far, we have a pretty stable group of members who are following our online and in-person activities. We organize talks. We have had, for example, Greg Lopez and Massimo Pigliucci. I would say the main reference of Stoicism in our channel, and we have translated this into Spanish to share with the rest of the communities. We also organize reading and practice activities. We have a support group, and we do outdoor activities such as philosophy hikings and the like. Well, I'm posting right now. I'm about to post the information of Stoa Madrid on the chat. And well, I have to say, during the last 3 years, I have seen a steady growth of the interest of people in Stoicism, especially with the sad arrival of the pandemic in later 2020. It was an opportunity to show how useful and how practical Stoicism is, and the nurturing and supportive approach of a Stoic community. Well, I also have to say thank you again to Massimo Pigliucci for the interview he did with a Spanish organization called Aprendemos Juntos. It was a great way to share Stoicism with the Spanish community, and lots of people who have seen that video translated to Spanish approach Stoa later. So thank you so much, everybody, for this opportunity. And I'm happy to hear some questions later.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Kelly's. And as Kelly's mentioned, we're going to have plenty of time for questions. Before we do that, I'm going to ask all the panelists to answer one more question before we kind of open it up to questions from the audience, but most of our time today will be for questions. So the next question I have is, what do newcomers find particularly difficult about Stoicism in your part of the world based on your experience? I'm curious to see if there are strong similarities or differences between both conceptual things as well as practical things. Do people universally have problems practicing? If so, for what? And conceptually, there's a lot of difficult things in Epictetus's famous part of the Discourses where he says to kiss your child and remember that her nature that she may die. A lot of people find that difficult, but I'm curious to see if there's variation. And so I'm going to start with Logan and ask you, what do people in your experience find most difficult about Stoicism where you are?
Yeah.
Well, Logan, you just remuted yourself.
Oh, hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. I think you were kind of into it already, Greg, but it's this the issue that I've seen is actually explaining how Stoicism is something that has room for emotion, room for love, room for these type of things, which people, obviously sometimes misinterpret when they're reading the text or just read snippets and don't actually dive into the full meaning of the philosophy. So a lot of the things that I've seen, at least in my group discussions with Norwegians, is this difficulty with accepting that or understanding that Stoicism has this room for emotion, and that it's not a philosophy that means that you're cold towards other things, that you're don't care for other things, other people. So I think that's the most difficult part, because it's this being sort of disattached from things, but at the same time caring for them. And it's hard to get that through, what that actually means fully. I think that's the biggest thing that I've had, that we've had big discussions about in our group, at least.
Excellent. Thank you, Logan. Next, I'll turn to Kelly's to see what you have to say about the biggest difficulties in your neck of the woods.
Okay, I got it, I think. You hear me? Awesome, thank you. Well, I agree with Logan, and actually we have been discussing this question. I have been discussing it with the group because I was going to come here. And I think it's a matter of semantics. So we all think it's a matter of semantics. For example, the words control, indifference, rationality means something different in our culture in modern days than it meant in the past. So when people read control, they think we are talking about, some kind of control freak philosophy or suppressing emotions. When they read about indifference, they connect it with I don't care. I shouldn't feel anything, and that is not possible. Or rationality, people think it's about being knowledgeable or knowing facts, or this having this upper lip, a stiff upper lip, right? So I think maybe we as a group, as an international group, we should start changing these words, and maybe instead of talking about rationality, differentiating it from knowledge, or intellectual things. So maybe changing these words that don't mean the same could be a great difference. Of course, death is always a difficult pill to swallow, but then when you explain it, and I always have this time with the group to have not only to read, but to talk about things, I see how their perception change. So also having more room for discussion with people could helps me a lot.
Excellent. So you brought up a practical issue around death and how all things decay in a sense, which is a common thing. And also part of what you said resonates with what Logan said concerning kind of the problem with Stoic difference, but different emphases as well.
Yeah.
Part of it is the small s Stoicism versus the large s, and Logan emphasized more the caring while still being indifferent and how those come along. I'm curious, Sascha, if you also have seen similar things or different things in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, similar. I would say. Conceptual difficulty, I think, is concerning the indifference. That does not mean, and I think it's also a part of because of the language difficulties. That it does not mean that it's totally that doesn't matter. It's just it just means that it's not on the same page as the virtues, but it's still valuable. Can mean a lot to human lives. I mean, health or also wealth and friendships and or other relationships, but it is it's not on the same level as being having a good character or living a good life. And that's from a conceptual point of view. I think practically, I think it's dealing with emotions. It came up yes recently in at Stoicon-x 2022, where one participant said, but when I'm angry, when the anger has to go somewhere, and it was hard to grasp her or dealing with this emotion that she could think it through. And it's not just about suppressing emotions; it's getting the right judgment about events or situations, and that you can channel these primary impulses to create a better judgment of the situation and to experience healthier emotions.
Thank you, Sascha. Yeah, so like that, I think that's known as the pneumatic theory of emotions, that if you bottle up emotions, then it gets they kind of overflow and it's natural to release them. So it's interesting to see that concern coming up. Thank you. Aldo, what are the biggest obstacles and challenges that you see in Brazil?
Well, our big challenge is introducing Stoicism, is to present each as worldview according to which the cosmos is a sentient and divine being, and that we are essential parts of this being, her sons and daughters. From this point of view, we human beings are brothers and sisters, and there is only one humanity. But the obstacles to the reception of these ideas in Brazil are racism and authoritarianism, which still constitutes an essential, unfortunately, part of Brazilian culture. We try to overcome it by underlying some humanist values. At the same time, we criticize the modern view, unfortunately becoming popular in Brazil, of individualistic Stoicism. This current bias is a dangerous misinterpretation of Greek and Roman Stoicism, according to us.
Excellent. Thank you. It's interesting to hear the physics is coming up in Brazil as something that's kind of an obstacle to discuss. Thank you again, Aldo. And we will go finally to Henry to see what the biggest challenges are in Indonesia in terms of presenting and practicing Stoicism.
Yeah, I think the different in terms of challenges here in Indonesia is before we even get to the tenets of Stoicism, there are two layers of challenges that a beginner have to overcome. The first one is just the concept of philosophy is so alien to us. Like even the translation of the word filsafat is not a native word. So I assume in the Western Hemisphere world, if you mention the word philosophy, people get the idea. It's a recognized field, but not in Indonesia. So even if they have some understanding or recognition of the word, they would still think that it's a very high ivory tower, middle-aged people talk, which have no bearing to our everyday life. So that's hurdle number one. Now, if they can overcome that, comes hurdle number two. And that is, Indonesia is a highly religious country. I think if you Google it, we are always top in terms of percentage of people who still believe in God and practicing religion. 90% of the population are Muslims, highly practicing Islam. And not all of them, but obviously when we have been brought up in a very religious way of life, some of us can look at philosophy with a little bit of suspicion, because is it trying to replace religion? Is this a competition to my faith and my belief? So there will be some resistance or doubts to understand philosophy because of that. But the curious thing is when they can overcome those hurdles, when they are willing to read and learn about Stoicism, it's actually, some of the concepts are actually very easy to grasp. Like living in accordance with nature. If we understand nature as, other fellow human beings, we are very collectivist society. So we have always been, since little, are taught to maintain harmony with the neighbors, keep good terms with other people. So that one is slightly easier conceptually. And at the same time, Stoicism helps us to address the downside of collectivist society. Is we often say to others, what will the neighbor say? Whenever we want to do things, that common phrase is, are you sure? What will the neighbor say? So we are constantly conscious of other people's opinion. And I think that falls exactly in the dichotomy of control, right? You need to learn to let go because other people's opinion are not up to us. I guess one difficult concept in Stoicism is indifference to death, I would say. I mean, I wrote in the book about death is part of, natural order of things and it should be treated indifferently. But that one is slightly harder to accept because, for most of us, death is a portal to an afterlife, right? And afterlife here means two potential outcomes. You go to heaven or you go to hell. So people are really afraid of death. Mm-hmm. And to tell them that, death is nothing, that one's probably harder to swallow. So yeah, that's probably clear.
Thank you, Henry. You brought up a couple of really interesting points, partly the tension with native religion, as well as we could probably broaden that to cultural trends wherever we are, and kind of the tension with Stoicism. Stoicism's always been a little bit against the grain. Epictetus was telling his students that most of them were probably natural not Epicureans. I got the meme confused in my head. But yeah, and so that's part of the kind of tension. And then there's also death, which you brought up as well. I wanted to open the floor to any of the panelists. We have some questions from the audience coming in, but I wanted to open the floor if you had a response or wanted to build on something that Henry said, or also if you had other questions for other panelists that brought up something in your mind. Feel free to raise your hand physically and let me know, and then speak up. If not, then we can probably move on to some of the questions that are coming in from the audience. One thing that was brought up, so Henry, you brought up the difficulties of translation, and it's often hard to translate Greek to kind of any language, like arete and virtue in English is not a great match in my view. But one question that came from the audience was from Porter, who asked that he noticed that everybody on the panel is speaking English. And Porter's an American, and he thinks that kind of English is the lingua franca, so to speak, of Stoicism. He was wondering if that seems to be true. I can say from the Stoic Fellowship's perspective that we are all English speaking, and generally what I've seen from the modern Stoicism perspective as well as Stoic Fellowship perspective is most of the activity is in the English speaking world. But I wanted to ask the question to all the panelists, optionally, you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but have you come across language barriers when trying to communicate just with others worldwide in terms of Stoicism, and then communicating with your own locale? Is there a major problem with language barriers? Aldo, and then Kelly's afterwards. Aldo, you are muted. Maybe Kelly's? Nope.
Oh, no.
Okay.
No, it's a real problem because in Brazil, few people speak in English and few people read in English. and also it's not easy to get into this English word. After some years, I'm starting to have some fluency, but it's not easy at all. It's very difficult, and it's for sure is a barrier for the communication with other people around the world, because we have many people, many interesting people, many people with excellent ideas about Stoicism, but we cannot make them heard by others because of this barrier.
Right, and one of your major pushes is to kind of translate things into Brazilian Portuguese as well, so you're trying to fill that gap to some degree.
Sure, yeah.
Excellent. Kelly's, did you have anything to say?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it is, I wouldn't say a barrier, but definitely in Spain, not everybody speaks English, especially in this generation I am in, and people from 30 to 60 years old here, not all of them speak Spanish or talk. So even when I invite people to Stoa, then I have to make the translations, and not everybody can participate. So yeah, but I would say, and this is a question that always comes to my mind, is whatever happened to Esperanto? We should definitely have like a lingua franca. Everybody is learning and can talk, right? I love English, I have to say. I love this language, but I understand not everybody does. And for me, it's a shame. I cannot share everything. And even today, lots of people at Stoa Madrid are not participating because they don't have the level to understand and to follow, So, well, yeah.
Excellent, thank you. And I am aware that there are some questions. There are some materials that are being translated, and you're part of the initiative to help translate Stoic Fellowship material into Spanish as well, and we appreciate that. Just a reminder to people in the audience that you're welcome to put any questions in the chat that you'd like. You could either direct message Greg S, or you can just put them in the general, and I'll try to catch them. But we do have some other questions related to what came up earlier. In terms of the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as kind of combining that with online versus in-person meetings. And I'm curious, a couple of people asked in the chat whether you prefer talking or discussing Stoicism online or in person, and why. And we can combine that with how the pandemic has influenced your possible dynamics within Stoicism around the world. Both if you run a group personally, how people interacted and how they took to online versus in person. And also, was there an uptick in Stoicism during the COVID-19 pandemic in your part of the world? Feel free to just speak up if you have anything to say about that. Maybe starting with Sascha or Logan, if either one of you have anything to say. Oh, Logan does.
Yeah, so in Norway, the concept of home office became very normal overnight, and in a way, it was good for our group because we were able to meet more regularly, because the barrier to actually meet was very low. We could do a little bit later. You didn't have to think about transport and all this stuff. So in that way, it was good that we were able to kind of hold the number of meetings constant or actually increase. And we were also able to have other participants that weren't actually in the area and that couldn't participate earlier. So we actually gained a few group members in the Trondheim group that don't actually live in Trondheim because of that. So it kind of it made things a little bit easier to include others in the discussion, which has been positive, at least for our group.
Thank you, Logan. Yeah, and Modern Stoicism holding stuff online because it kind of increases access. That's why we have the online conference. Sascha, I'm curious if you have anything to add to that?
Yes, with regards to Stoicon, we made a similar observation like you did, that people outside of Hanover took part at Stoicon last year, who did not live in Hanover. But I find it more engaging if you do it as an in-person event. You can have a bit more conversation and outside of the talks, a bit more activities, which are not possible if you do it just as an online event. Regarding on regular events, I think it's very comfortable to do it online because you don't have to leave your home and I have a family too, so it's more convenient to do it online, and anybody can take part in it, and it's very, yeah, I think that's a good solution for regular events.
Thank you, Sascha. Anybody else have anything to add about COVID-19 or online versus in person? Aldo, I see you have your hand raised.
Oh yeah, it was, we use it as an opportunity to increase our contacts in Brazil, because Brazil is a very large country, and to hold physical meetings is particularly difficult and expensive. So we start to do a lot of seminars and things like this online, and we increase our contacts, and now we are much more together, so to say. And even if someone lives very far away, we are always in contact. We are always talking through WhatsApp and whatever. It helped in this sense us to constitute our community.
Maybe I can add something.
Yes, Achilles, and then Henry.
Just really quick, because it's funny. Here in Spain, people are very fond of being outside and going outside. So sometimes the meeting being online is something that people don't like anymore. So I started at Stoa doing this kind of symposium somehow, with food and dinner and stuff and talking, and like very relaxed. And I feel like here, at least in Spain, people prefer the in-person meetings. I mean, we still do almost everything online, because actually what Aldo said, people that are not in Spain, Spanish speakers from South America, for example, have joined. And but yeah, people here do prefer or ask for in-person meetings.
Thank you. Henry, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I just want to comment on COVID actually. I understand that with hindsight, everything seems to click perfectly, right? But sometimes I wonder that had it not been for COVID, maybe Stoicism in Indonesia wouldn't have been as popular. Because my book was out late 2018, 2019, exactly before the pandemic. And a lot of my readers reached out to me saying that the concept, the philosophy really, really helped them through the pandemic. So it's just like, it was so timely, I guess, when the concept was introduced here. So yeah, I mean, COVID in a way probably, helped make it more popular, at least in my country. Maybe, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Henry. And I have another question. It's specifically addressed to Aldo, but I think we can broaden the question a little bit as well. Somebody asked specifically to Aldo, how does the rise and state of populism as a political philosophy, or populism in general, in Brazil affect the spread of Stoicism in Brazil? And I'll ask Aldo first to answer that question, but then I also am curious because there's a lot of political turmoil and changes throughout the world, and as people may know, Stoicism first arose in a state of political turmoil in Greece. And so first, Aldo, I'm curious how populism is affecting Stoicism in Brazil, and then I'll open the question to politics and political climate and affecting it in your area in general.
Yeah, in Brazil, we have the same polarization we have in some other parts of the Western, right? Like in Europe and North America, and it's a very difficult situation. And the far right tried to kidnap Stoicism, but fortunately, we were able to defend it from them. So we are in the middle of, so to say, a war. But we think we are gaining some terrain, some over them. But it's a fight, and I'm laughing, but it's not laughable at all. It's a very sad situation because the far right is trying to impose some anti-humanistic values. It's very sad, and it's totally unfair, totally to link this kind of thinking with Stoicism, because Stoicism is, first of all, a humanistic philosophy. It could never be a anti-humanistic philosophy linked with fascism and such ideologies as this one.
Thank you, Aldo. Does anybody have anything to add about their political climate and how it's affecting the state of Stoicism there? If not, then I can move on to plenty of other questions that we have, and this is generally for everybody. I kind of asked what the major challenges were for Stoicism in your area, but what do you find that most attracts people to Stoicism when you communicate Stoicism to them? What do they like about it? I'm curious to see if there are differences or similarities. So starting with Logan, I'm curious, like, what's the biggest attractor to Stoicism when somebody comes fresh to Stoicism, and what makes them stick around afterwards?
Yeah, I think that the biggest attractor, a little bit like I was talking about in the interview that was posted, is that the world's becoming so diffused in terms of what we can control and what we have influence over. That sorry, my daughters. So the ability for us to seek more clear. I think you have to go to the next person. 1 second.
Fair enough. Sascha, I'm curious if you have anything to say about what's the biggest attractor for bringing people to Stoicism, as well as what makes people stick around in your neck of the woods.
Yes, maybe I can playing on to what Logan just said, because I think it's also here in Germany that people are keen to learn. They have a handle on things in life, especially on adversity in life, and I also think that makes them stick. Maybe in addition also that they have people to talk about, because philosophy, I don't know how it is in other countries, but in Germany, I think it's more this academic discipline, and that you can do philosophy as a practical way of life is not that common. And I think they are pleased to find out that this is not the case, and that they can talk about such topics to ordinary people and not feel ashamed or inferior because they don't know everything. So.
Thank you, Sascha. Yeah. I actually have a follow-up question that I'm going to bring to the other panelists as well as we go around with this question. But Sascha, I'm curious, like, out of the people who you know who are into Stoicism, roughly what % of the people who you're in regular contact with practice it versus are more interested in discussing it only? Oh, yeah, for you, Sascha, if you want to do that as a follow-up.
Oh, how many actually practice it in daily life? I can't tell. I would say that some of those who participated in our events or in the Stoic Conferences-X, they're interested in discussing it, but I don't know. I would think that they don't really that they're not really into practicing it in their daily lives. But I think maybe half of it are actually considering it and putting it into daily practice. So it's at least they want to try it out. If they're staying with it, that's not the question, of course.
Cool. Thank you, Sascha. Henry, I'm curious what attracts people to Stoicism in Indonesia, in Europe, in your view and your experience, as well as what keeps them there, and also how many of them actually you think regularly practice it at the end of the day? They actually do something somewhat regularly related to Stoicism. What are your thoughts on that, Henry?
I mentioned earlier about we are being collectivist society, right? For good or for worse. I mean, it has its plus side, it has its downside as well. And I think part of the attraction is learning to accept that you cannot please everybody. I think in this part of the world, there is that pressure trying to please everybody. And, obviously it will lead only to frustration. So a lot of them say that learning Stoicism is accepting that in the end, other people will form their own opinion no matter what you do, and you just have to live with that. So that one can feel liberating. The second one, I think, has to do with how social media in Indonesia, at least, can be very polarizing, especially in the last decade with the politics and the echo chamber. So the tension between opposing faction or sides become too sharp, right? And it can make people really anxious, And actually, we see families torn apart just because of different political choices. So I guess Stoicism kind of teach them to slow down, chill. You don't have to be overtly agitated or reactive towards provocation. Yeah, I think I'm sharing them in my book. It's about, I think it was Epictetus who said, he who angers you become your master. I think that belongs to Epictetus, if I'm mistaken. So that kind of self-control, restraint, and actually the cardinal virtues, some of them are already easier to understand. It can be compatible with Islamic or other religious teaching here as well. And with regards to how many practice it is a very tough question, Greg, because how do you define practice, right? Because it's a spectrum of practice. I would suspect most of them try to apply dichotomy of control. I think that's the easiest to apply. But whether they practice virtues, for example, the complete four cardinal virtues, preferred, indifferent, I think those are probably more intermediate level. So, but it's a tough question to answer, Greg. Yeah,
sorry for hitting so hard. Thank you, Henry. But I see Logan is back, and I'm curious if you have any thoughts on the question of what attracts and keeps people to Stoicism, as well as how many people practice. Henry mentioned that one of the interesting things I thought you said, Henry, was that it helped paper over some other tensions within family groups and stuff, like and this resilience and the spirit of cosmopolism is kind of present there. And I thought that was an interesting observation. Logan, I'm curious if you have anything to add to that and what is attractive about Stoicism where you are.
Yeah, I can pick up a little bit where I left off also, because I think that what's happening, at least in Norway, is, as is all over the world, is that the world's becoming more diffused. We're becoming more globalized, and Norway, especially as such a small country, they're required to look outward for a lot of things. So being able to at least see where they stand in their position in this world and what they have control over, influence over in their own lives, I think is an important kind of one of the big draws to it. Because it gives you some clarity on, okay, what can I actually impact and what is actually out of my hands. So I think that's the big draw for a lot of people here, at least. And then another thing that I wanted to bring forward is, again, going back to the way that the Norwegians are already kind of a little bit Stoic from their own culture, is this idea of spending a little bit more time in nature, and this idea of slowing down and being deliberate in your actions. So in Norway, it's kind of an ideal that people have a small cabin that they can draw to and spend time in nature, go for walks and hikes, and just be with family and think and spend this quality time out in nature, using their hands to do work. I mean, it's really, and that's something that I don't have one of those cabins yet, but this idea of connecting a little bit more to nature, to our planet, to the diversity that we have in this world, instead of spending it every day inside on a screen, I think is an important aspect of practicing Stoicism the way that it should be practiced.
Excellent. Thank you, Logan. We just have 1 minute left. I wanted to quickly toss over to Kelis or Aldo if you had any quick things to add about this, so you had an opportunity to say something, but we only have under a minute. So
I want a cabinet like this one also. Love the idea.
Thank you, Aldo. And Kelis, would you like the final word?
Sure. Okay, what brings people to Stoicism? Well, what people like the most at Stoa, or what I've seen they enjoy the most, is the dichotomy of control. It's like very relieving, and It's like you can put things in. Actually, the trichotomy of control is something that is coming over and over to the group. So that's something that people really enjoy and feel useful. And also, well, this idea of the indifference, right? The indifference when they do understand what it means, right? Like knowing or putting in perspective what is really important, you know, and working towards that. That is something that people enjoy a lot. And how many participate? Well, I always like to talk about the group we have. I mean, lots of people follow Stoa Madrid, and they are on the Facebook and even on the WhatsApp group. But we have a group that is practicing every week. We are following Jonas Salgeberg book, and we are practicing his exercises every week. So I know these people, and we are in touch on a specific group, on a separate group. So these people are, you know, at least they are reflecting on these ideas every day. We have a routine, you know. Also, people enjoy that a lot. Having a routine to prepare your day ahead, that is something that is also useful.
Cool. Thank you for the insight, Kelly's. Well, we are out of time for today. So I'd like to thank everybody and hope on the panel to give us some insight into what's going on practically, theoretically, and about how Stoicism is happening worldwide. And I'm going to toss it back to Phil and Greg S. But thanks again to the panelists.
Thank you.